Hello and welcome to this channel. Today we're going to be talking about the Peavey Bandit. As you might have seen in my recent demos, I've recently picked up a Peavey Bandit 65 amp. And while I was in the process of buying that amp, I ended up going down a bit of a rabbit hole and looking into all of the different generations of the Bandit. So today that's what we're going to be having a look at, and we're going to be going through every generation of the amp. So we're going to start off in 1980 with the Bandit. This is the only one of these amps that is just called Bandit and has no extension on the end of it that signifies anything. And like I said, this came out in 1980 and only ran for that 1 year. These are often known as the Gunsmoke Bandits because of the silkscreen logo on the front of the amp, which resembled the opening credits of the popular 60s TV show Gunsmoke. These amps were made in Meridian, Mississippi in the USA, and were 50 watt RMS. They featured, like other Bandits, a 12-inch speaker, although uniquely for this Bandit, they feature an eminence speaker which was made for Peavey. These amps are often forgotten about due to their short production life and the fact that they're just, especially these days, quite hard to come by. Following on from the Bandit, we have the Solo Series Bandit, and those were produced from 1981 until 1983. Again, this was a 50 watt amplifier with a 12-inch speaker, although with this generation they've gone over to using Peavey's proprietary speaker, the Scorpion. These amps, in terms of controls and looks, look very similar apart from the logo to the first Bandits, although these are more common. In 1983, the Solo Series Bandit was then followed up by the Solo Series Bandit 65. If you want to hear one of these and have a more in-depth demonstration of one, then make sure you check out my previous video which I mentioned earlier. This for me is my favourite amp in the Bandit series. It's still using a Scorpion speaker, but has the power rating increased to 65 watt RMS. These were also made in Meridian in the USA, and like the previous two amps which I've already mentioned, this was the last amp to feature the saturation circuit, which is one of the controls on the amp and gives you a fuzzy distortion, and is very much like having a distortion pedal built into the amp. The Solo Series Bandit 65 ran from 1983 until 1987, and then in 1987 it was replaced with the Solo Series Bandit 75. As the name would suggest, like with the previous generation, the power rating was upped to 75 watt RMS. They still featured the Scorpion speaker, but introduced, as well as a bright switch, the Super Sat control, which was an improvement upon the saturation control of the previous generation, but aimed to have a more valve amp-like distortion. To my ear, it's a bit less thick and fuzzy and a bit more of an aggressive distortion, or more of an overdrive sound, if you will. The Solo Series Bandit 75s ran for only a few years from 1987 until 1989, at which point they were replaced by the Solo Series Bandit 112. Now these are some of the most popular versions of the Bandit and are often known as the Teal stripe amps. These ran from 1988 until 1995, and this was the point where the 80 watt RMS standard for the Bandit was established, and this is a staple right up until today with the current models. It was at this point where you could also have the option of the Sheffield speaker instead of the Scorpion speaker. The Sheffield speaker being a new speaker developed primarily for Eddie Van Halen to be paired with the 5150 amps, although it could also be optioned into this amp as well. These speakers aimed to sound more like a worn-in Celestion Vintage 30 style speaker, and so give you a bit more of an aggressive and modern tone out of the amps. The Teal stripe amp would be the last amp to feature the Super Sat function, and it would also introduce some more complex tone shaping capabilities, and it would include a lot of what Peavey would go on to call their trans-tube technology. However, in this amp it hasn't received that title yet, but some people will argue that really this is the first of the trans-tube Bandits despite it not being called that. As I said earlier, the Teal stripe amps would run up until 1995, and then in 1996 they were replaced with the Trans-Tube series Bandit 112, also known as the Silver Stripe amps, and these would run from 1996 until 1999. Again, 80 watts and featuring the Sheffield speaker. These amps would also have an interesting feature called the T-Dynamics control, which was a knob which let you choose the percentage of the power that you were using. It was at this point where Peavey started using the Trans-Tube branding on their amps, which was technology designed, like I said earlier, to try and make their solid-state amps sound more like a valve amp. and they really leaned into this in a marketing sense with the branding. Whilst these are most commonly known as the Silver Stripe Bandits, they are also sometimes called Black Box Bandits. In 2000, the Silver Stripe Bandits would then be succeeded by the Trans-Tube Series 2 Bandit 112s. These are most commonly known as the Red Stripe Bandits. These again are an 80-watt amp with a Sheffield speaker and share a lot of similarities with the previous Silver Stripe amps, albeit with a few improvements. The run of these Red Stripe amps from 2000 to 2004 would be the last amps to be made in Meridian in the USA. From 2004 to 2005, these same Red Stripe Bandits would start being made in China, still being referred to as the Trans-Tube Series 2 Bandit 112s, or often as being known as Chinese Red Stripe amps. There are a few differences that give these away. The main ones of these being that the speaker is now a Blue Marvel speaker, and the fact that these amps on them will say designed in the USA, not made in the USA. With the exception of the speaker though, these amps are the same as the US made Red Stripe, it's just where they're manufactured that changed. And then finally, in 2006, Peavey would release what we have today as the Bandit, and that is still in production and available to buy now. These are often known as the Cyclops Bandits due to the round Peavey logo, with them being brought in line to match the design and style of other amps such as the Tone King. Like with the Series 2 Bandit 112s, these amps are also made in China. They're 80-watt RMS, and they feature the Blue Marvel speaker. This latest iteration also features more modern features such as having a simulated output for recording, and it also features a digital reverb rather than a spring reverb. The T-Dynamics power control knob has also been replaced in this unit with a 3-way switch, now only offering you 25, 50 and 100% power rather than the control between 10 and 100 that you got with the knob on previous generations. So that's a run through of the different generations of the Peavey Bandit and all of the major changes from generation to generation. I hope that all makes sense and that you're able to learn something for this, and if you are in the market for a Bandit, you now know what the differences between all of the models are. Let me know down in the comments any experience you have with these amps and which version of it is your favourite. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.